hit the world stage with a summit with Putin. You ever wonder why Russia and China were treated so differently? I mean, they had tons of evidence of the lab leak theory. They ignored that from China, and yet no evidence whatsoever about the Russian dossier, but treated that as gospel. Joining me now for the rebuttal is David Tafuri, a former foreign policy advisor for Barack Obama's campaign. David, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So, David, I kind of hinted at it there in the opening. I'm genuinely curious. The Democrat Party, when we were told, the collusion hoax and all of these tapes, these gross tapes that were supposed to be, none of it was actually true. It was repeated as gospel with Democrat media and Democrat activists everywhere. Yet now with this lab leak theory, where there's a mound of evidence that this is the likely scenario, it was downplayed by just about everyone, and we were called conspiracy theorists. Why the difference there?
Dan, I have no idea why you'd say that there's nothing truthful about the Mueller investigation, the Russia investigation. First of all, 17 national security and intelligence agencies of the U.S. government found that Russia did interfere in our election.
No,
Moreover,
they didn't. No,
dozens.
That's not true.
Dozens.
David, that's
yes,
not true. It wasn't
yes,
17.
They did. I've read the report.
It was one.
I can.
No,
Dan,
no, they didn't. That's not
Dan,
true.
I can show you the report.
That didn't happen.
Well,
yeah, that didn't. I know. I've read it. I actually wrote a few books on it. That's actually not the case. It wasn't 17. So that's not true. Matter of fact, the NSA, Mike Rogers from the NSA, did not concur with that report.
That's what the report says. It says 17 intelligence agencies were involved. It's on paper. I can show it to you. In any event, there's no point in arguing about that. You also can't deny the fact that dozens of Russians were indicted for interfering in our election. They interfered by doing cyber attacks on the Democratic National Committee headquarters. By the way, they did those cyber attacks 5 hours after President Trump pleaded with Russia to find Hillary Clinton's emails. They also engaged in misinformation.
But how come Bob Mueller didn't find a connection? But again, listen, I don't want to relitigate this because there's been an entire Mueller report that's disputed everything you're saying, right? There is no connection between any American and the Russian government collusion. You read the Mueller report. The 17 agencies thing is not accurate.
That means you haven't read it.
There's no evidence there.
You haven't read it because you're actually misstating. You're misstating what the report says.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
Okay.
And I can't believe you're putting out there again the 17 agencies myth that's been debunked 1,000 times. But listen, there's no evidence what you're saying is actually true.
Can I speak?
The Mueller report was pretty crystal clear that there is no connection between the Trump campaign or any American and the Russian government. So why play it up while downplaying the lab leak hypothesis, my initial question, where there were mounds of evidence that's leaked from a lab? How does that make sense?
Dan, there are 440 pages of the Mueller report. If you've read it, you would know it found numerous contacts between the Trump campaign, Trump family members, and Russia. In fact, it found 170 contacts involving 18 Trump family members and campaign officials. It found that there was not evidence of there was not sufficient. Dan, let me finish.
Are you really
They found that there was not sufficient evidence.
Is it illegal? So people contacted Russians. You mean Hillary Clinton never spoke? Didn't she hit a reset button with a Russian? Was that illegal? I'm just checking. Was that illegal?
I know you don't like what I'm saying. That's why you talk over me. But if you allowed me to actually finish my sentences, then you could respond. What I was saying is that what the Mueller report found was that there was not sufficient evidence to bring charges against people, but it found plenty of evidence of communications between Trump officials and Russia. It also found plenty of evidence leading to indictments of Russian agents who did interfere in our election. Yeah. Those are facts. That's what the report says.
Yeah, I know. I read it, and you conveniently leave out the fact that, the team Hillary Clinton hired was dealing with Russian intelligence people. You can look up the name Rinat Akhmetshin when you get a chance. Do some homework. It's in my book. But, David, again, on the lab leak theory, why did they downplay that, given that mounds of evidence seem to indicate that the lab leak theory was real, while playing up the whole collusion hoax, which there's absolutely no evidence to indicate was true? You never got to that.
Regarding the lab leak theory, I think you're right that there is mounting evidence that this might have come from a lab leak. And we certainly need to get to the bottom of that. That's super important. Of course, the coronavirus developed during the Trump administration, and President Trump was responsible for investigating it. And if you're critical of the investigations that happened at the time, you'd have to criticize President Trump. President Biden has pushed the WHO to go forward with an investigation, and he's hammered China for not cooperating with the WHO. So I agree with you that we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to know, was it a lab leak, or did it come about from being passed from an animal to the human? That's really important, and we shouldn't overlook that.
Yeah, they shouldn't have overlooked it, a year ago when it would have been helpful. But, the media and liberals called us all conspiracy theorists.
Well,
despite the evidence everywhere.
A year ago, President Trump was president, and he had all of the resources to conduct a proper investigation.
Yeah, he was going after China. Yeah, and the liberals were focused on things like, calling the Wuhan virus some kind of like xenophobic attack, despite viruses around the world being called after the regions they came from. But I got to run, David. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next, my hero of the week.